Welcome, dear listener, to the world of the Ming Dynasty, a time when China flourished with art, culture, and untold stories of love and mystery. Tonight, we journey back to those ancient days, to walk among emperors in their golden palaces and common folk in their humble villages. Let these tales carry you gently into peaceful dreams. Our stories tonight are whispers from the past, woven with romance, touched by the supernatural, and grounded in the human heart. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let us begin. Story 1. The Jade Pendant of the Moon Pavilion. In the third year of the Hongwu Emperor's reign, there lived a palace scholar named Qin Wei. He was not born to nobility, but his exceptional calligraphy had earned him a position in the Hanlin Academy, where he copied imperial documents and ancient texts. The palace was vast, with courtyards that seemed to stretch endlessly under the Beijing sky. Qin Wei spent his days in quiet contemplation, his brush moving across rice paper with practiced grace. He was content in his solitude, or so he believed, until one autumn evening when the moon hung full and bright above the forbidden city. He had been working late, as was his custom, when he heard the soft sound of a guqin drifting through the evening air. The music was melancholic and beautiful, each note seeming to carry the weight of unspoken longing. Qin Wei set down his brush and followed the sound through the shadowed corridors. He found himself at the Moon Pavilion, a small structure overlooking a lotus pond. There, silhouetted against the moonlight, sat a woman playing the ancient instrument. Her fingers moved across the strings with such delicacy that Qin Wei dared not breathe for fear of disturbing her. When the final note faded into the night, she turned. Her name was Lu Yan, and she was a lady-in-waiting to one of the emperor's lesser consorts. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted in the fabric of both their lives. "Forgive me," Qin Wei said softly, bowing. "Your music drew me here like a moth to flame." Lu Yan smiled, though there was sadness in it. "Music is meant to be heard. Though few venture to this pavilion anymore. They say it's haunted by the ghost of a concubine who drowned herself in the pond." "Do you believe in ghosts?" Qin Wei asked, stepping closer. "I believe in sorrow," she replied. "And sorrow often lingers in places like this." They began to meet in secret at the Moon Pavilion, always when the moon was bright enough to light their way but dim enough to hide them from prying eyes. Qin Wei would bring her poems he had copied, and she would play music that seemed to come from her very soul. One night, Lu Yan wore a jade pendant carved in the shape of a lotus. "This belonged to my grandmother," she told him. "She said it would protect me from harm and guide me to my true fate." But their meetings could not remain secret forever. In the rigid hierarchy of the palace, such a relationship was forbidden. A eunuch had seen them and reported to his superiors. Qin Wei was summoned before the palace magistrate. The night before his hearing, Lu Yan came to him one final time. "Take this," she said, pressing the jade pendant into his hand. "Whatever happens, know that you have carried my heart with you." "I cannot accept this," Qin Wei protested. "It's your protection." "You are my protection," she whispered. "And I am yours, across whatever distance may separate us." The next day, Qin Wei stood before the magistrate, prepared to accept banishment or worse. But as he waited, a strange thing occurred. The magistrate's assistant, an old man with kind eyes, leaned forward and whispered something to his superior. The magistrate's expression changed. "Scholar Qin," he said, his voice less harsh than before. "It seems there has been a mistake. The eunuch who accused you has been found to have made false reports before. You are dismissed." Qin Wei bowed deeply, his heart pounding. As he left the hall, the old assistant caught his eye and gave him the slightest nod. Later, Qin Wei would learn that this man was Lu Yan's uncle, a palace official who had quietly intervened. But there was a price. Lu Yan was sent away to serve in a distant provincial palace, a transfer that was both punishment and mercy. They would never see each other again in the palace halls they had known. Years passed. Qin Wei rose in rank and eventually retired to a small estate in Jiangnan. He never married, though many urged him to. He kept the jade pendant always, hanging it by his window where the moonlight could touch it. One evening, now an old man, Qin Wei sat in his garden playing a guqin he had learned to master over the years. He played the same melody Lu Yan had played that first night, his fingers finding the notes from memory. As the final note faded, he heard footsteps. An elderly woman stood at his gate, her hair silver but her eyes unmistakable. She wore simple traveling clothes, but around her neck hung a pendant identical to the one that hung in his window. "I told you," Lu Yan said softly, tears streaming down her weathered face, "that the jade would guide me to my true fate." They spent their remaining years together in that garden, two souls finally reunited, their love having outlasted the empire's rules and the passage of time itself. And on clear nights, neighbors would hear the sound of two gyukins playing in perfect harmony, their music drifting across the water like a blessing.
Story 2. The Painter's Dream. During the Yongle Emperor's reign, when the Forbidden City was newly built and the Grand Canal bustled with trade, there lived a painter named Zhao Ming in the city of Suzhou. He was known throughout the region for his landscape paintings, which captured the misty mountains and winding rivers with such precision that people said you could step into his paintings and lose yourself in them. But Zhao Ming carried a secret. Every night, he dreamed of a woman he had never met. She appeared in a garden filled with white peonies, always at twilight, always wearing robes the color of dawn. In his dreams, they would talk for hours about art and philosophy, about the nature of beauty and the meaning of permanence. He had dreamed of her for so long that she felt more real to him than the waking world. He began to paint her, trying to capture her face, the curve of her smile, the way the fading light caught in her eyes. But each painting fell short of the truth he knew in his dreams. One day, a wealthy merchant commissioned Zhao Ming to paint a portrait of his daughter before her wedding. The merchant's family was traveling from Beijing to Suzhou for business, and they would stay for 1 month while the portrait was completed. When Zhao Ming arrived at the merchant's residence, he was led to a garden to meet his subject. As he stepped through the moon gate, his breath caught in his throat. Before him stretched a garden filled with white peonies, just coming into bloom. And there, standing among them in the twilight hour, was the woman from his dreams. Her name was merchant's daughter Lin Mei, and she was as startled as he was. "Forgive me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But have we met before? Your face is so familiar to me." "I have dreamed of you," Zhao Ming said before he could stop himself. Then, embarrassed, he added, "That is, I have dreamed of someone who looks remarkably like you. In a garden much like this one." Lin Mei's eyes widened. "I too have had such dreams," she whispered, "of a painter who showed me worlds I had never seen. We would walk through his paintings together, through mountains and rivers that existed only in his imagination." They stared at each other, two strangers connected by something neither could explain. Was it fate? Was it magic? Or was it simply that two souls, lonely in their own ways, had reached out across the barrier between sleeping and waking to find each other? The portrait sessions began the next day. But Zhao Ming found he could barely paint. His hand would shake whenever Lin Mei looked at him, and she would blush and look away, creating a cycle of nervous energy that made work nearly impossible. "Perhaps," Lin Mei suggested one afternoon, "you could paint the garden instead, and I will simply be part of the landscape?" So Zhao Ming painted the garden, with Lin Mei among the peonies, and as he worked, they talked. She told him of her life in Beijing, the strict confines of a merchant daughter's world, the marriage that had been arranged for her to a silk trader she had met only once. He told her of his art, his dreams, his fear that nothing he created would ever truly capture the beauty he sought. "Perhaps," Lin Mei said thoughtfully, "we seek perfection in our creations because we cannot find it in our lives." "Or perhaps," Zhao Ming replied, mixing white and pink for a peony, "we have already found it, but we're too afraid to recognize it." Their eyes met, and in that moment, both knew the truth they had been avoiding. They had fallen in love, but it was a love without future. Lin Mei was promised to another, and Zhao Ming was a mere artist, without the wealth or status to propose marriage to a merchant's daughter. The month drew to a close, and the painting was nearly finished. On the final night before the family's departure, Lin Mei came to the garden alone. The moon was new, and the darkness was complete except for a single lantern. "I cannot leave without telling you," she said, "that these have been the happiest days of my life, even though they must end." "They don't have to end," Zhao Ming said desperately. "We could run away together. I could paint anywhere, and you." "And I would bring shame upon my family," Lin Mei said sadly. "My father has borrowed money for my dowry. If I refuse this marriage, he will be ruined. I cannot do that to him." Zhao Ming bowed his head. He knew she was right. In the rigid structure of Ming society, individual desire meant little against family obligation and social harmony. "Then let me give you something," he said. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small painting, no larger than his palm. It showed the white peony garden at twilight, and in it, two figures walked together among the flowers. "Whenever you look at this," he said, "remember that somewhere, in dreams or in another life, we are still walking together." Lin Mei took the painting with trembling hands. "And you must promise me something," she said. "Promise me you will paint. That you will create beauty for the world, even if we cannot share it together. Promise me your gift will not die because of sorrow." "I promise," he said. They stood in silence, memorizing each other's faces in the dim lantern light. Then Lin Mei turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. The next morning, the merchant's family departed for Beijing. Zhao Ming returned to his studio and looked at the completed portrait. It was the finest work he had ever done. Lin Mei seemed to live within the silk, her eyes full of secrets, her smile touched with melancholy. Years passed. Zhao Ming never married. He painted constantly, and his fame grew until his works were sought by collectors across the empire. But his most prized piece, the garden with two figures walking among white peonies, he never sold. It hung in his studio, a reminder of a love that transcended the waking world. In Beijing, Lin Mei married the silk trader and bore him 3 children. She was a dutiful wife, though those close to her noticed she often seemed distant, as if part of her existed elsewhere. In her private chambers, she kept a small painting of a garden at twilight, and sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, she would stare at it and smile. And on certain nights, when both were sleeping, they would meet again in that garden of dreams, walking among the white peonies that bloomed eternally, in a place where obligations and society could not reach them, where love existed in its purest form, untouched by the sorrows of the waking world.
Story 3. The Tea Master's Secret. In the city of Hangzhou during the Chenghua Emperor's reign, where the West Lake reflected the clouds like a mirror of heaven, there lived a tea master named Wang Shu. His tea house, the House of Lingering Fragrance, was known throughout the region for serving the finest Longjing tea, prepared with a precision that bordered on art. But Wang Shu had a secret. Each night, after his last customer departed, he would light a single stick of incense and prepare tea not for the living, but for the dead. It had begun 5 years earlier, on the anniversary of his wife's death. Mai Ling had been the love of his life, a scholar's daughter with a quick mind and a gentle spirit. She had died in childbirth, taking their unborn child with her, leaving Wang Shu alone with his grief and his tea. On that first anniversary, he had prepared her favorite tea, Biluo from the spring harvest, and set it at her memorial tablet. As the steam rose from the cup, he could have sworn he saw her face in the mist, smiling at him with the warmth he remembered. Every night since, he had prepared tea, and every night, the steam would form shapes, sometimes her face, sometimes their child who never was, sometimes just abstract patterns that nonetheless brought him comfort. He told no one of this ritual, fearing they would think him mad. Then one evening, a woman entered his tea house just as he was about to close. She was perhaps 30 years old, dressed in the simple robes of a wandering Buddhist nun, but there was something ethereal about her, as if she wasn't quite solid. "Forgive the late intrusion," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "But I have traveled far, and they say your tea can soothe even the most troubled spirit." Wang Shu bowed. "I would be honored to serve you, though I warn you, I am about to close." "Then perhaps just 1 cup," she said, settling at a table by the window overlooking the lake. Wang Shu prepared the tea with his usual care, and as he poured, the woman watched him with unusual intensity. "You prepare tea as if you're praying," she observed. "Perhaps I am," Wang Shu admitted. "Tea, properly prepared, is a form of meditation. A way to quiet the noise of the world and hear what lies beneath." "And what do you hear?" the woman asked. Wang Shu was silent for a moment. Then, surprising himself, he said, "I hear my wife's voice. Or perhaps I only wish I did." The woman sipped her tea, her eyes never leaving his face. "Your wife passed beyond the veil, but she has not left you. Every night, she drinks the tea you prepare, grateful for the offering and the love it represents." Wang Shu's hands trembled. "How could you know about that?" "Because I see things others cannot," the woman said gently. "I walk between the worlds, carrying messages for those who can no longer speak. Your wife asked me to tell you something." Wang Shu sat down heavily, his heart pounding. "What?" She wants you to know that she is at peace. That she does not regret the love you shared, even though it ended in sorrow. And she wants you to live, truly live, not just exist in the shadow of her memory. Tears streamed down Wang Shu's face. How can I? She was everything to me. She was much, the woman agreed. But you are still here, and life still has gifts to offer you, if you will accept them. Before Wang Shu could respond, the woman stood. I must go. But know this, your wife will always be part of you, but she does not wish to be a prison. She wishes to be a foundation upon which you build new joy. She walked to the door, and Wang Shu suddenly called out, Wait! What is your name? The woman turned and smiled. I have many names. But you may call me the messenger. She stepped through the door, and when Wang Shu rushed after her, the street was empty. No one could have disappeared so quickly unless they were not entirely of this world. The next morning, Wang Shu opened his tea house as usual, but something had changed within him. He still prepared tea with care and reverence, but now he also talked with his customers, learned their stories, allowed himself to be present in the moment rather than lost in the past. One day, a woman came to his tea house. She was a widow, her husband lost to illness 2 years prior. She ordered tea and sat alone, staring out at the lake with an expression Wang Shu recognized all too well. He prepared her tea and, on impulse, sat down across from her. Forgive me, he said, but you look as I once felt. As if the world has lost its color. She looked at him, surprised but not offended. Is it so obvious? Only to someone who has walked the same path, Wang Shu said. I lost my wife 5 years ago. For a long time, I thought my life had ended with hers. But it didn't, the woman said softly. No, Wang Shu agreed. Though it took me years to understand that grief and life can coexist. That we can honor those we've lost while still embracing what remains. They talked for hours that day, and she returned the next day, and the next. Her name was Ju Lan, and she had been a merchant's wife before her husband's death had left her alone and uncertain. Over the months, a friendship grew between them, tentative at first, then stronger. They found comfort in their shared understanding of loss, and slowly, something more than friendship began to bloom. Wang Shu felt guilt at first, as if by caring for Ju Lan, he was betraying Mai Ling's memory. But then he remembered the messenger's words, and he understood that love is not a finite resource. His love for Mai Ling had not diminished, it had simply made space for something new. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset over West Lake, Ju Lan said, Do you still prepare tea for her? For your wife? Wang Shu nodded. Every night. I would like to join you sometime, Ju Lan said. To thank her for loving you so well that you learned how to love again. And so that night, Wang Shu prepared tea not just for Mai Ling, but for Ju Lan and her lost husband as well. As the steam rose from the cups, he saw shapes in the mist, 2 figures, hand in hand, smiling. It might have been his imagination, or it might have been something more. But Wang Shu chose to believe it was a blessing, a sign that those who had passed beyond the veil wanted nothing more than for the living to find happiness. He and Ju Lan married the following spring, in a simple ceremony by the lake. Wang Shu continued to prepare tea each night for those who had gone before, but now Ju Lan sat with him, and together they honored the past while building a future. And sometimes, when the conditions were just right, the steam would form shapes that looked like people dancing, celebrating the resilience of the human heart and its infinite capacity for love, even in the face of loss.
Story 4. The Emperor's Nightingale. During the Jiajing Emperor's reign, there lived within the Forbidden City a young eunuch named Li Chen. He had entered palace service as a boy and had risen to become an attendant in the imperial garden, tending to the plants and animals that provided respite for the emperor and his court. Li Chen's particular responsibility was the aviaries, where hundreds of songbirds from across the empire were kept. He had a gift with animals, a gentleness that made even the wildest birds calm in his presence. One autumn evening, as Li Chen was locking the aviaries for the night, he heard a sound that made him pause. It was a bird's song, but unlike any he had heard before, complex, mournful, and achingly beautiful. He searched the garden and found, hidden among the chrysanthemums, a small nightingale with unusual silver-gray plumage. It was not a species he recognized, and it bore no imperial tag marking it as part of the collection. "How did you get here, little one?" Li Chen murmured, carefully picking up the bird. It did not struggle but looked at him with eyes that seemed almost human in their intelligence. He brought the nightingale to his small quarters and fashioned a comfortable cage, planning to report the bird to his superiors in the morning. But that night, something extraordinary happened. As the moon rose full and bright, the nightingale's form began to shimmer. Before Li Chen's astonished eyes, the bird transformed into a young woman, her robes the same silver-gray as the nightingale's feathers. "Please," she said, her voice carrying the melodic quality of the bird's song, "do not be afraid, and do not report me to your masters." Li Chen, though terrified, managed to find his voice. "What are you?" "I am a spirit of the forest," she said. "My name is Yin Yu, and I have come seeking help. My home, a grove of ancient trees in the western hills, is to be cut down to provide wood for a new palace wing. If this happens, all the spirits who dwell there will be displaced, and the balance of nature in the region will be disrupted." "Why come to me?" Li Chen asked. "I am nothing, a mere eunuch with no power or influence." "You have something more valuable than power," Yin Yu said. "You have compassion. I have watched you tend to the birds with such care. I hoped that compassion might extend to spirits as well." Li Chen sat down, his mind reeling. "Even if I wished to help, what could I do? I cannot countermand the emperor's orders." "No," Yin Yu agreed. "But the emperor himself might be persuaded, if the request came in the right way." She explained that the Jiajing emperor was known for his interest in Taoist mysticism and his belief in omens. If a sign could be arranged, something that suggested the grove was sacred and should not be disturbed, the emperor might reconsider. "But creating false omens is dangerous," Li Chen protested. "If discovered, we would be executed." "Then we must not be discovered," Yin Yu said simply. Over the following days, they plotted carefully. Yin Yu, in her bird form, would sing at specific times and places within the garden, her extraordinary song drawing attention. Li Chen would ensure that stories circulated among the servants about the mysterious nightingale, building its reputation as something special. Then, during the emperor's regular garden walk, Yin Yu would perform a song so beautiful and otherworldly that it would captivate him. Li Chen would then discover an ancient text suggesting that silver-gray nightingales were messengers of the Taoist immortals, and that they appeared only in places of great spiritual significance. The plan was risky, but they had little choice. As they worked together, spending long hours in preparation, Li Chen found himself drawn to Yin Yu. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, wise and ancient, yet playful and curious about the human world she rarely entered. "Why do you live as a bird?" he asked her one night. "Because it is easier," she said. "Spirits who take permanent human form become vulnerable to human emotions, human pain. As a bird, I can observe without being entangled." "Is that truly easier?" Li Chen asked. "Or is it simply lonelier?" Yin Yu looked at him with surprise. "You are perceptive for a human." "Perhaps I understand loneliness better than most," Li Chen said quietly. "I have lived in this palace since childhood, surrounded by thousands of people, yet always apart. Eunuchs belong neither to the world of men nor to the world of women. We exist in the spaces between." For the first time, Yin Yu seemed uncertain. "I had not thought of it that way." The day came for their plan. The emperor walked in the garden, and Yin Yu, perched in an ornamental plum tree, began to sing. Her song was so beautiful that even the emperor, jaded by a lifetime of luxury, stopped in his tracks. "What bird is that?" he demanded. Li Chen, who had been waiting nearby, hurried forward. "Your Majesty, it is a most unusual nightingale. I have never seen its like before, and its song seems almost supernatural." The emperor watched the bird intently as it sang, and Li Chen could see the wonder growing in his eyes. Later, When the ancient text was conveniently discovered in the palace library, the emperor took it as a sign from the heavens. The order to cut down the grove was rescinded. The trees were declared sacred, and a small Taoist shrine was built at the edge of the forest. Yin Yu's home was saved. That night, as they celebrated quietly in Li Chen's quarters, Yin Yu said, "I must return to my forest now. My work here is done. Will you ever come back?" Li Chen asked, unable to hide the sorrow in his voice. Yin Yu was silent for a long moment. "I have lived for centuries," she said finally. "I have watched dynasties rise and fall, have seen the endless cycle of human joy and suffering. I thought I understood everything about your kind. But you have shown me something I had forgotten." "What is that?" "That connection, true connection, is worth the risk of pain. You asked me if my life as a bird was easier or lonelier. The answer is both. It is easier because it is lonelier, but easier is not the same as better." She transformed back into her nightingale form, but before she flew away, she sang one final song. This one clearly meant only for him, a melody of gratitude and affection and goodbye. Li Chen returned to his duties in the garden, tending the aviaries as before. But each evening, as the sun set, he would hear a familiar song drifting from the direction of the western hills. Yin Yu had not forgotten him. And on certain nights, when his duties were done, Li Chen would walk to the edge of the forbidden city and look toward the hills, where a small silver-gray nightingale would be waiting. She would transform, and they would talk through the night, sharing stories of their worlds, the ancient forest and the golden palace, the realm of spirits and the realm of humans. They could never truly be together, not in any conventional sense. But they had found something perhaps more precious, a friendship that transcended the boundaries of their natures, a connection that required nothing more than the willingness to see each other truly, and to cherish what they found there.
Story 5. The Herbalist's Daughter. In the mountains of Sichuan during the Wanli Emperor's reign, there stood a small village called Lotus Valley. The village was isolated, reachable only by a narrow path that wound through treacherous mountain terrain, and the people who lived there were hardy and self-sufficient. Among them was an herbalist named Feng Wei and his daughter, Feng Mingzhu. Her name meant bright pearl, and it suited her, for she had a clarity of mind and spirit that seemed to illuminate the world around her. Mingzhu had learned her father's trade from childhood, gathering medicinal plants from the mountainsides and preparing remedies that had healed countless villagers. She was 23 years old, skilled and confident, but unmarried, a source of constant concern for her father. "Why will you not consider any of the young men who court you?" he would ask. "Because none of them see me," Mingzhu would reply. "They see the herbalist's daughter, a useful wife who can heal their children and prepare their medicines. But they do not see Mingzhu." One day in early summer, a stranger arrived in Lotus Valley. He was a young man, perhaps 25, dressed in the worn robes of a traveling scholar. He had been caught in a storm on the mountain pass and had injured his leg in a fall. The villagers brought him to Feng Wei's house, and Mingzhu tended his wound with practiced efficiency. As she worked, the stranger watched her with curious intensity. "You have skilled hands," he observed. "Where did you learn such techniques?" "From my father," Mingzhu replied without looking up. "And from the plants themselves, which teach you their properties if you pay attention." "Plants teach," the stranger said with interest. "How so?" Mingzhu finally looked at him, and something in his eyes made her answer more fully than she usually would. "Each plant has a nature, a character. Some are hot, some cold. Some are gentle, some aggressive. To understand how to use them, you must first understand what they are, not just what they do." "That is a philosophy as much as a medicine," the stranger said. "All good medicine is philosophy," Mingzhu replied. The stranger's name was Lu Feng, and he was indeed a scholar, traveling the countryside to study local customs and practices for a comprehensive work on Chinese regional culture. His injury would take at least 2 weeks to heal, and during that time, he stayed in the village, paying for his room and board with stories and by teaching the village children to read. Mingzhu found herself drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. Lu Feng treated her as an equal, asking her opinion on matters of philosophy and listening intently to her answers. He accompanied her on her herb-gathering expeditions, and they would talk for hours about everything from the nature of healing to the meaning of happiness. "Why do you travel alone?" Mingzhu asked him one day as they sat on a mountainside. The valley spread below them like a painting. "Because I seek something," Lu Feng said, "though I'm not sure what. Knowledge, perhaps, or understanding, or maybe just a place where I belong." "And have you found it?" Mingzhu asked. Lu Feng looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw something that made her heart beat faster. "I think I might have," he said quietly. But on the night before Lu Feng was to leave, his leg fully healed, something happened that would change everything. A child in the village fell ill with a high fever, and no remedy seemed to help. Mingzhu worked through the night, trying every medicine in her father's collection, but the child only grew worse. In desperation, she remembered an old story her grandmother had told her about a rare mushroom that grew in the deepest part of the forest, in a cave said to be guarded by spirits. The mushroom had extraordinary healing properties, but it was dangerous to retrieve. The cave was treacherous, and the spirits were said to test those who entered. Without telling anyone, Mingzhu set out into the night. She took only a lantern and her courage, following the old paths her grandmother had described. But Lu Feng had seen her leave. Despite his still tender leg, he followed, catching up with her on the forest path. "You should not be here," Mingzhu said when she realized he was behind her. "Neither should you," Lu Feng replied. Not alone, they continued together, and as they went deeper into the forest, strange things began to happen. The trees seemed to move, their branches reaching out like arms. Lights flickered in the darkness, not lantern light, but something else, something that pulsed with its own life. "The spirits," Mingzhu whispered. "They know we're here." When they reached the cave, they found the entrance guarded by a grove of ancient trees that seemed to form a living wall. As they approached, the air grew cold, and a voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Why do you disturb this place?" Mingzhu stepped forward, her voice steady despite her fear. "A child is dying. I seek the healing mushroom to save them." "Many seek what grows here," the voice replied. "But the mushroom shares its power only with those who understand the balance." "What will you offer in exchange?" Mingzhu hesitated. She had nothing of material value. Then Lu Feng spoke up. "I offer my knowledge," he said. "I have traveled across many provinces, collecting stories and wisdom. I freely give all of it to you. And I offer my skill," Mingzhu added. "Whatever healing art I possess, whatever I learn in the future, I pledge to use not for profit, but for those in need." There was a long silence. Then the trees parted, revealing the cave entrance. Inside, glowing faintly with bioluminescence, grew a cluster of mushrooms unlike any they had seen, translucent, with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Mingzhu carefully harvested one mushroom, taking only what was needed and leaving the rest to continue growing. As they turned to leave, the voice spoke again. "You have passed the test, not because of what you offered, but because you came together willing to risk for another. That is the true medicine: connection, compassion, sacrifice." They hurried back to the village, and Mingzhu prepared a tea from the mushroom. By dawn, the child's fever had broken, and color was returning to their cheeks. The village rejoiced, but Mingzhu and Lu Feng sat quietly by the child's bedside, exhausted and overwhelmed by what they had experienced. "I was meant to leave today," Lu Feng said. "I know," Mingzhu replied, "but I find I cannot. Not yet. Perhaps not ever." Mingzhu looked at him and saw on his face the same thing she felt in her heart: a recognition, a completion, as if two halves of a whole had finally found each other. "Then stay," she said simply. Lu Feng did stay, and over time, he became part of Lotus Valley. He helped Mingzhu in her work, documenting the medicinal plants and their uses, creating a comprehensive text that would eventually be copied and distributed across the region, saving countless lives. They married in the spring, in a simple ceremony attended by the whole village, and they lived their lives in service to others, never forgetting the lesson the spirits had given them. Story 6. The Lantern Maker's Promise. In the city of Nanjing during the Hongji Emperor's reign, there lived a lantern maker named Sun Jian. His shop stood near the Qinhuai River, and his lanterns were celebrated throughout the city. He created beautiful works of silk and paper, painted with scenes of mountains, rivers, and birds. His most extraordinary creations were sky lanterns that could float into the night, carrying wishes to the heavens. During festivals, the sky above Nanjing would glow with his lanterns, each carrying someone's hope into darkness. Sun Jian inscribed each with tiny blessings, believing every lantern should carry good fortune. One autumn day, a young woman entered his shop. She wore simple servant's clothes, but carried herself with quiet dignity. Her name was Xiaowen. "I need a special lantern," she said softly, "for my brother. He is very ill, and the doctors say there is little hope. I want to send a prayer to the heavens for him." Sun Jian's expression grew serious. "Then we must make the finest lantern possible. The moon festival is in 3 days. Come back in 2 days. I have saved my wages for months," Xiaowen said. "It is not much." Sun Jian waved his hand. "A prayer for a sick brother deserves the best I can create." For 2 days, Sun Jian worked with more care than ever before. He used the finest silk in shades of blue matching the evening sky. He painted cranes flying toward the moon, symbols of longevity and health. He inscribed it with healing blessings so small they covered every inch of the surface. When Xiaowen returned, she gasped, "This must have cost a fortune. I cannot afford. It is already paid for by the love you have for your brother, which is worth more than gold," Sun Jian said quietly. Tears filled her eyes. "How can I thank you?" "Release it with a pure heart. That is thanks enough." On the moon festival night, Sun Jian found himself at the riverbank where people gathered to release lanterns. He told himself he wanted to see his creation float skyward, but truthfully, he wanted to see Xiaowen again. He found her by the water, the lantern glowing in her hands. Together, they watched as it began to rise into the night air, joining hundreds of others in the sky. Then something extraordinary happened. The lantern pulsed with light, growing brighter until it shone like a small star. Then, impossibly, it changed direction, moving against the wind, drifting north toward the hills where a family village lay. "Did you see that?" Xiaowen whispered, filled with wonder. "I saw it," Sun Jian confirmed, equally amazed. They watched until it disappeared. Then Xiaowen said, "I must go. My mistress will wonder where I am. But thank you, Master Sunday. Whether it helps or not, you have given me hope, and that is precious." She hurried into the crowd, and Sun Jian remained by the river, staring at the sky. He felt changed, though he could not say how. Weeks passed. Sun Jian thought often of Xiaowen, wondering if her brother had recovered. But she did not return, and he had no way of finding her. Winter came, and he realized he had fallen in love with a woman he had met only twice. Then, one spring morning, Xiaowen appeared at his shop. She looked different. Her clothes were finer, color in her cheeks. "Master Sun," she said, her voice bright with joy. "My brother recovered. The very night we released the lantern, his fever broke. The doctors called it a miracle." Relief washed over Sun Jian. "I am glad, but I cannot take credit for miracles. You gave me hope when I had none, and sometimes hope is its own miracle," Xiaowen said. "I have left my position at the magistrate's household. My family no longer needs my wages so desperately, and I wanted to learn a craft of my own." She paused shyly. "I want to learn to make lanterns. If you would teach me." Sun Jian smiled, and in that smile was the beginning of something unexpected. "I would be honored." Xiaowen became his apprentice, proving naturally talented. Her hands were steady, and she understood instinctively the balance of structure and beauty that made a fine lantern. But more than that, they discovered a companionship beyond master and apprentice. They would work in comfortable silence or talk for hours. Sun Jian taught her not just the craft but the philosophy, that each lantern was a small act of hope, a light sent into darkness. One evening, Xiaowen said, "Do you remember how the lantern changed direction and flew north? I think it was not just the lantern that was special. It was the moment, the combining of your craft, my love for my brother, and something beyond this world that recognized the purity of our intentions. Do you believe in forces beyond what we can see? Sun Jian asked. I believe in love, Qiaowen said. And love is already a force beyond what we can see. It moves us, changes us, gives us strength we did not know we had. If that is not magic, what is? Sun Jian looked at her and saw not just his apprentice, but the woman he loved. Qiao Wen, he said softly, you have become very dear to me, more than I know how to express. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. And you to me, you showed me kindness when I was a stranger. You taught me a craft and gave me purpose. How could I not love you? They married that summer in a small ceremony. Sun Jian's shop became their shop, and together they created lanterns that became famous throughout the region. People said there was something special about their lanterns, that they carried extra blessings, that wishes released on them had a strange tendency to come true. Perhaps it was true, or perhaps two people who had found love and purpose brought that joy to their work, and people sensed it. Either way, their lanterns continued to light the skies of Nanjing for decades, each one a small beacon of hope in the darkness, a reminder that even in the deepest night, light endures.
Story 7. The Scholar and the Fox Spirit. In the forests of Zhujiang during the Tianqi Emperor's reign, there lived a young scholar named Su Liang. He was preparing for the imperial examinations in a small cottage on the edge of an ancient forest, studying the classics day and night. His family was poor, and this was his only chance to rise above their circumstances. One night, as Su Liang studied by lamplight, he heard soft scratching at his door. He opened it and found a small red fox with an injured paw sitting on his threshold. Poor creature, Su Liang murmured. He knew foxes were sometimes said to be spirits in disguise, tricksters who brought misfortune. But the fox looked at him with such pitiful eyes that compassion overcame caution. He brought the fox inside, cleaned its wound, and bandaged it with strips from an old shirt. The fox watched him with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Rest here tonight, Su Liang said. In the morning you can return to the forest. But when morning came, the fox had vanished. In its place sat a young woman with red hair and amber eyes, reading one of his books. Su Liang stumbled backward, heart racing. What? Who are you? I am the fox you helped last night, she said, smiling. My name is Hu Yu and I owe you gratitude. I want no debt, Su Liang said nervously. Please just leave me in peace. But you are not at peace, Hu Yu observed, gesturing to his books. You are anxious about your examinations, worried your family's hopes rest on shoulders too weak to bear them. How do you know that? He demanded. I have watched you for weeks. You study until your eyes fail, then lie awake worrying. You eat little, rest less. At this rate, you will collapse before the examinations begin. What concern is it of yours? You showed me kindness. Let me return it. I have lived 300 years and accumulated much knowledge. Allow me to help you study. Su Liang knew he should refuse. Fox spirits were notorious for bargains with hidden costs. Yet he was struggling, and vast portions of the classics eluded his understanding. What do you want in return? He asked warily. Only your company, Hu Yu said. I am lonely. Spirits live long lives but isolated ones. We observe humans but cannot truly be part of your world. For a few months, I would like to pretend otherwise. It seemed a small price. Su Liang agreed, and so began an unusual partnership. By day, Hu Yu took fox form and slept. By night, she became human and helped him study. She was an extraordinary teacher. She had read every classic, knew every historical event, could recite lost poetry. More than that, she made the material come alive, showing Su Liang not just what to memorize but why it mattered. As weeks passed, Su Liang looked forward to their sessions not just for knowledge but for her company. Hu Yu was witty and insightful, with a way of seeing the world that challenged his assumptions. Why do you want to pass these examinations? She asked one night. To bring honor to my family. To rise in society, to serve the empire, Su Liang said automatically. Those are reasons you have been taught to give. But what do you truly want? Su Liang was silent. No one had asked him that before. I want to matter, he said finally. I want my life to mean something. To help people, to leave the world better than I found it. That is worthy, Hu Yu said softly. But remember, you do not need a government position to matter. Every act of kindness changes the world in small ways. You mattered when you helped an injured fox. You would matter even if you never passed any examination. Her words stayed with him, shifting his perspective. He continued to study, but the desperate anxiety eased, replaced by quieter determination. As the examination date approached, Su Liang realized he had fallen in love with Hu Yu. It was impossible, absurd. She was a fox spirit, he was human, their worlds could not truly intersect. Yet his heart did not care about logic. One evening he gathered courage and said, Hu Yu, when the examinations are over, will you stay? Or must you return to the forest? Her expression grew sad. I cannot stay, Su Liang. My time in human form is borrowed magic that cannot be sustained indefinitely. Soon I must return fully to my fox nature. Then let me come with you, Su Liang said impulsively. I will give up everything. No, Hu Yu said firmly. That is not your path. You have worked too hard and have too much to offer the world. I will not let you throw that away, not even for me. Then what are we doing? Su Liang asked, his voice breaking. Why pretend we can have something that must end? Hu Yu took his hands. Because even brief joy is worth having. Because the time we have shared has mattered to both of us. Because love does not require forever to be real. The night before Su Liang left for the examinations, Hu Yu gave him a small fox figurine carved from red jade. Keep this with you. When you doubt yourself, hold it and remember. You matter, Su Liang. Not because of any title or position, but because of who you are. Su Liang traveled to the provincial capital and took the examinations. They were difficult, but when doubt crept in, he would touch the jade fox and remember Hu Yu's words. He answered each question thoughtfully, drawing not just on memorized facts but on the deeper understanding she had helped him develop. Weeks later the results were posted. Su Liang had passed, scoring high enough to continue to the imperial examinations in Beijing. His family was overjoyed, but Su Liang felt only bittersweet pride and loss. He returned to the cottage, hoping to find Hu Yu, but it was empty. Only a small red fox sat on the threshold, watching him with familiar amber eyes. It touched its nose to his hand, then disappeared into the forest. Su Liang understood. She had kept her promise, she had helped him succeed. But she could not stay, and he had to walk his path alone. He went on to pass the imperial examinations and became a county magistrate. Throughout his career, he was known for compassion and wisdom, for seeing beyond rules to the human beings they affected. He never married, though many urged him to, and he kept the jade fox figurine on his desk always. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, a red fox would appear in his garden. It would sit watching him through the window, and Su Liang would feel warmth in his chest, a reminder that some connections transcend the boundaries between worlds, that love does not require forever to be real, and that kindness, once given, echoes through time in ways we cannot always predict or understand.
Story 8. The Silk Weaver's Song. In the city of Suzhou during the Longqing Emperor's reign, where canals wound through streets like silver threads and silk was as valuable as gold, there lived a young woman named Tang Ling. She worked in one of the great silk workshops, operating a loom with such skill that her fabrics were sought after by merchants across the empire. But Tang Ling had a secret. As she worked, she would sing softly, and her songs seemed to weave themselves into the silk. Fabric she made while singing was said to bring good fortune to those who wore them, to have colors that never faded, patterns that seemed to move in certain lights. Tang Ling did not know why her singing had this effect. It had started when she was a child, when her grandmother taught her old songs, melodies passed down through generations of women in her family, songs that spoke of rivers and mountains, of love and loss, of the eternal turning of seasons. One day, a young merchant named Bai Cheng came to the workshop to commission a special piece of silk. He needed a gift for the emperor's birthday, something extraordinary that would honor his trading company and gain favor at court. The workshop master brought him to Tang Ling. She is our finest weaver. If anyone can create what you envision, it is she. Bai Cheng described what he wanted, a silk panel depicting the Yellow River, with mountains rising on either side and clouds drifting overhead, all in shades of blue and silver that would shimmer like water itself. It will take at least 3 months, Tang Ling said. I have 4 months before the emperor's birthday, Bai Cheng said. Will that be sufficient? It will, Tang Ling agreed. She began work the next day, and as she wove, she sang the old songs her grandmother had taught her. Bai Cheng, curious about the progress, began visiting the workshop weekly. He would stand quietly at a distance, watching Tang Ling work, and slowly he became aware of her singing. At first, he thought it was simply a pleasant habit, but as he listened more carefully, he began to notice something unusual. The songs seemed to have a pattern, a structure that went beyond mere melody. They told stories, preserved memories, contained wisdom. One day, after watching her work, he approached. "Your songs, where did you learn them?" Tang Ling looked up, surprised. She had not realized he could hear her. "From my grandmother. They are old songs, passed down through my family." "They are more than songs," Bai Cheng said. "They are history, poetry, philosophy, all woven together. Have you ever written them down?" Tang Ling shook her head. "I cannot write. I am only a weaver." "Only a weaver?" Bai Cheng repeated. "You create beauty that merchants pay fortunes for, and you preserve songs that contain centuries of wisdom. There is no only about what you do." His words stirred something in Tang Ling. No one had ever spoken to her this way before, had ever suggested that her work was anything more than a means to earn her living. Over the following weeks, they began to talk, first about the silk, then about the songs, then about everything else. He told her about his travels, the places he had seen, the different peoples and customs he had encountered. She told him about her life in Suzhou, the rhythms of the workshop, the beauty she found in the ordinary. Slowly, inevitably, they fell in love. But there were complications. Bai Cheng was a merchant of a higher social class than Tang Ling. His family had expectations, and there were already discussions of an arranged marriage to another merchant's daughter, a union that would strengthen business ties. "I don't want to marry her," Bai Cheng told Tang Ling one evening as they walked along one of Suzhou canals. "I want to marry you." "Your family would never allow it," Tang Ling said sadly. "I bring nothing to such a marriage. No dowry, no connections, no status." "You bring yourself," Bai Cheng said. "Is that not everything?" But Tang Ling knew the world did not work that way. Love, however strong, could not overcome the rigid structures of Ming society. The silk panel was nearly complete. It was the finest work Tang Ling had ever done. Each thread placed with perfect precision, the colors shimmering exactly as Bai Cheng had envisioned. She had sung over every inch of it, pouring not just her skill but her heart into the wake. On the day she finished, Bai Cheng came to collect it. The workshop master unveiled it, and everyone present gasped. The yellow river seemed to flow across the silk, the mountains to rise with majestic grandeur, the cloud to drift on an enveloped breeze. But there was something more, a quality that transcended mere craftsmanship, a sense of life and movement that made the panel almost magical. "It is perfect," Bai Cheng whispered. "More than perfect. It is a masterpiece." He paid the workshop master a sum that made everyone whisper in amazement. Then he turned to Tang Ling. "Walk with me." They walked to their favorite spot along the canal, where willow trees draped their branches over the water. There, Bai Cheng took her hands. "I have thought long about our situation, about what is possible and what is not, and I have made a decision." Tang Ling's heart sank, believing she knew what was coming, that he would tell her they must part, that duty to his family outweighed his love for her. But instead, Bai Cheng said, "I am refusing the arranged marriage. I am telling my family that I will marry whom I choose, or I will not marry at all." "They will disown you," Tang Ling said, tears in her eyes. "Perhaps," Bai Cheng agreed, "or perhaps they will come to accept it. But either way, I cannot live a lie. I cannot marry one woman while loving another. It would be unfair to everyone involved. And if they do disown you, you will lose everything. Then I will become a small merchant, trading what I can. I have learned the trade well enough. We will not be rich, but we will have enough. And we will have each other, which is worth more than all the gold in the empire." Tang Ling wanted to protest, to tell him he was being foolish. But looking into his eyes, she saw his mind was made up, and arguing would only hurt him. "Then I will marry you," she said softly, "and I will weave silk to sell in your shop, and I will sing my grandmother's songs, and we will build a life together, whatever that life may be." Bai Cheng's family did not take the news well. There were arguments, threats, ultimatums. But Bai Cheng stood firm, and eventually, seeing they could not change his mind, he would not inherit the main business, but was given a small sum to start his own trading operation. It was enough. Bai Cheng and Tang Ling married and opened a small shop in Suzhou specializing in fine silks. Tang Ling wove. singing her songs, and her silks became known throughout the region for their extraordinary quality. Bai Cheng handled the business side, and slowly, steadily, they prospered. Years later, the emperor himself wore a robe made from Tang Ling silk. It was said to be the finest silk garment ever made, and when people asked about the weaver, they learned she was a woman who had started as a common workshop labour but whose skill and artistry had elevated her to become one of the most respected silk makers in all China. And on quiet evenings, if you walked past their shop, you might hear singing old songs passed down through generations, woven now not just into silk but into a life built on love, courage, and a belief that sometimes the most valuable things cannot be measured in gold or status, but only in the depth of connection between two human hearts.
Story 9. The Fisherman's Light. On the shores of Lake Tai during the Chongzhen Emperor's reign, the final years of the Ming Dynasty, there lived a fisherman named Wu Peng. He was a solitary man, weathered by years on the water, with hands rough from nets and lines and a face creased by sun and wind. Wu Peng lived alone in a small hut at the water's edge. He had been married once, long ago, but his wife had died in childbirth along with their daughter, and he had never recovered from the loss. For 20 years, he had lived in isolation, speaking only when necessary, finding solace in the rhythm of the tides and the company of fish and birds. Each evening, as darkness fell, Wu Peng would light a lantern at the front of his boat, a beacon to guide him home through the darkness. It was a simple act, one he had performed thousands of times, but to him it had become almost ritualistic, a small point of light against the vastness of the night. One evening in late autumn, as Wu Peng was preparing to bring his boat to shore, he saw something strange. Another light bobbed on the water, some distance from his own, but it moved erratically, as if the boat carrying it was in distress. Wu Peng rowed toward the light, his fisherman's instincts alert to danger. As he drew closer, he realized it was indeed a boat in trouble, a small vessel, taking on water, with a single occupant desperately trying to bail. "Hold on!" Wu Peng called out. He pulled alongside and found the occupant was a young woman, perhaps 20 years old, soaked and shivering. "My boat struck something," she gasped. "A submerged log, I think. It cracked the hull." Wu Peng did not hesitate. He helped her into his boat, then secured her sinking vessel to tow it to shore before it was lost. Once on land, he brought her to his hut and lit a fire while she dried herself. "Thank you," she said, teeth chattering. "If you had not seen my light, I would have drowned." "What were you doing out on the water alone at night?" Wu Peng asked. It was unusual for a woman to be operating a boat, especially at such an hour. "Looking for my father," she said. "He is a fisherman like you, but he did not return yesterday when he should have. I feared something had happened to him." Wu Peng felt a pang of sympathy. "What is your father's name?" "Li Bao," she said. "Do you know him?" Wu Peng did know him. Li Bao was another solitary fisherman who worked the waters of Lake Tai. They were not friends, exactly, but they had a nodding acquaintance, the silent recognition that exists between men who share a trade and territory. "I have not seen him in 2 days," Wu Peng said. "But the lake is large. He may have gone to the eastern shore, where the fishing is sometimes better." The young woman, her name was Li Mai, began to cry softly. "He would not stay away this long without sending word. Something is wrong, I know it." Wu Peng felt something he had not felt in 20 years, a stirring of concern for another person, a desire to help that went beyond mere duty. "Rest tonight," he said. "In the morning, I will help you search for him." Li Mai looked at him with gratitude. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Wu Peng was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because once I was alone and drowning, not in water, but in grief, and no one helped me. I do not wish that isolation on anyone else." In the morning, they set out together in Wu Peng's boat. They searched the waters methodically, checking all of Li Bao's usual fishing spots, asking other fishermen if they had seen him. By midday, they had found nothing, and Li Mai's despair was growing. Then, as they rounded a small island covered in reeds, they saw it, Li Bao's boat, capsized, caught in the shallows. They rowed quickly to it, fear clutching their hearts. But when they reached the island, they found Li Bao alive, sitting on the shore, his leg clearly broken. He had capsized in a storm 2 nights before, had managed to swim to the island, but had injured himself in the process and had no way to signal for help or repair his boat. My, he gasped when he saw his daughter. You should not have come looking for me. The lake is dangerous. More dangerous than leaving you here alone. Li Mai retorted, though her voice was thick with relief and tears. Together, Wu Peng and Li Mai got Li Bao into the boat and brought him back to shore. Wu Peng's hut became a makeshift hospital, with Li Mai tending to her father while Wu Peng continued to fish, sharing his catch to feed all 3 of them. Over the weeks of Li Bao's recovery, Wu Peng's solitary existence was transformed. Li Mai brought life and conversation to the quiet hut. She was intelligent and curious, asking Wu Peng about his life, his experiences on the lake, the changes he had seen over the decades. At first, Wu Peng answered in monosyllables, uncomfortable with the intrusion. But gradually, he found himself opening up, speaking of things he had not spoken of in 20 years. He told her about his wife, about the daughter who had never lived to take a breath, about the grief that had consumed him for so long that it had become his entire identity. You have been alone too long, Li Mai said gently. Grief is natural, but it should not be a prison. I do not know how to be anything else, Wu Peng admitted. Then perhaps it is time to learn, Li Mai said. As Li Bao healed, he too spoke with Wu Peng, and a friendship developed between the 2 fishermen. They discovered they had much in common, not just their trade, but their philosophies, their observations about the lake and its moods, their understanding of solitude and its blessings and curses. You have been kind to my daughter and me, Li Bao said one evening. When I am fully recovered, I will return to my own home, but I hope we can continue to be friends. It is foolish for men like us to live in isolation when companionship is possible. Wu Peng found himself nodding. I would like that. But when the day came for Li Bao and Li Mai to leave, Wu Peng felt an unexpected sadness. The hut would return to its former silence, and he would return to his solitary existence. He had grown accustomed to their presence, to the sound of voices and laughter, to the feeling of being part of something larger than himself. Li Mai seemed to sense his thoughts. You know, she said carefully, my father's house has extra room. And he could use help with his fishing now that his leg is not as strong as it was. If you ever grow tired of living alone, you would be welcome to join us. Wu Peng wanted to refuse, to retreat back into the safe familiarity of solitude. But then he remembered his own words to Li Mai on that first night, I do not wish that isolation on anyone else. Perhaps, he said slowly, I will visit. To see how Li Bao is managing. That visit became 2 visits, then weekly visits, then finally, Wu Peng moved his few possessions to Li Bao's house. He and Li Bao fished together, 2 aging men who had found in each other the friendship they had been missing. And Li Mai remained as well, unmarried and content, caring for her father and managing their household. She and Wu Peng would sit in the evenings and talk, and slowly, over months and years, Wu Peng felt something he thought had died with his wife, the stirring of affection, the possibility of love. He never remarried. The memory of his first wife was too precious, and Li Mai never asked it of him. But they lived together as family, bound not by blood or marriage but by choice and care and the recognition that the most profound connections are sometimes the ones we choose rather than the ones we are born into. Every evening, Wu Peng still lit his lantern before going out on the water. But now it was not just a guide for himself, it was a beacon for others who might be lost in the darkness, a small light against the vastness of the night, a reminder that even in isolation, we need not be alone, and that sometimes, saving another person is the same as saving yourself.
Story 10. The Garden of Lost Things. In the western suburbs of Beijing during the Jiajing Emperor's later years, there was a garden that most people avoided. It belonged to an old estate that had fallen into disrepair, and there were stories about it, whispers that it was haunted, that people who entered sometimes did not return, or returned changed in ways they could not explain. The truth was stranger than the stories. The garden was indeed enchanted, but not in the way people feared. It was a place where lost things gathered, not just objects, but moments, memories, and pieces of the past that had slipped away from the world and found refuge there. The garden's keeper was an ancient woman known only as Grandmother Chiu. No one knew how old she was. Some said she had been there since before the Ming Dynasty began, others that she was a spirit who had taken human form. Whatever the truth, she tended the garden with infinite patience, caring for the things that had been lost. One day, a young court official named Zhang Wei stumbled upon the garden. He had been wandering the city's outskirts, trying to clear his mind after receiving devastating news. The woman he loved, Lady Chen, was being forced to marry another man, a general who had the emperor's favor. Zhang Wei was powerless to stop it, despite his position and his desperate love. In his aimless wandering, he found himself at the garden's entrance. The gate was overgrown with vines, but it stood ajar, as if inviting him in. Zhang Wei, not caring where his feet took him, entered. The garden was unlike any he had seen. It was wild and unkempt, but there was an order to its chaos. Trees that should not grow in Beijing flourished here. Southern magnolias, northern pines, even a bamboo grove that seemed to whisper in multiple languages. And everywhere were objects, a child's toy here, a scholar's brush there, a soldier's helmet half buried in the grass. "You carry something heavy," a voice said, and Zhang Wei turned to find Grandmother Qiu watching him with eyes that seemed to see through him. "Something you are about to lose." "How do you know?" Zhang Wei asked. "Because all who come here are losing something, or have lost it already," Grandmother Qiu said. "This is a garden of lost things. It gathers what the world has let slip away. Can it keep a person from being lost?" Zhang Wei asked desperately. "The woman I love is being married to another. I will lose her forever." Grandmother Qiu studied him. "Love is complicated. It is not an object that can be possessed or lost. But I understand what you mean. Come, let me show you something." She led him deeper into the garden, to a section where unusual flowers bloomed. Some were beautiful, others strange, but all of them hummed with a faint light. "These are memory flowers," Grandmother Qiu explained. "Each one contains a memory that someone has lost, a first kiss, a childhood joy, a moment of perfect understanding with another person. When people lose these moments, when they fade from remembrance, they come here and take root." "Why?" Zhang Wei asked. "Because nothing is truly lost. Everything continues, somewhere. These memories wait here, hoping that one day, the person who lost them will remember and feel that joy again, even if just for a moment." She plucked a single flower and held it out to him. "This is yours, though you do not know it yet. A memory you will lose but may, perhaps, one day reclaim." Zhang Wei took the flower. As his fingers touched the petals, he experienced a vision, himself much older, standing in this same garden. And beside him was Lady Chen, also aged, wearing the lines of a life fully lived. They were holding hands and smiling, and there was peace in their faces. "I don't understand," Zhang Wei said when the vision faded. "How can this be my memory when it hasn't happened yet?" "Time is not as linear as you believe," Grandmother Qiu said. "What will be and what has been sometimes touch. This flower shows you a possibility, a potential future. Whether it comes to pass depends on many things." "What things?" Zhang Wei asked urgently. "On whether you remember what matters. On whether you let loss define you or teach you. On whether you hold too tightly or learn to let go." Zhang Wei left the garden more confused than when he entered, but something had shifted in his heart. He attended Lady Chen's wedding, and though it pained him, he saw that she was trying to make the best of her situation. The general was not a bad man, merely a practical one, and Lady Chen would be cared for, even if not loved in the way Zhang Wei loved her. Years passed. Zhang Wei rose in the bureaucracy, serving in various provincial posts. He never married, though opportunities arose. His work was his purpose, and he threw himself into it, becoming known as an honest and effective official. Then, nearly 20 years after Lady Chen's marriage, Zhang Wei received news. The general had died in battle, leaving Lady Chen a widow. She had returned to Beijing and was living quietly in her family's estate. Zhang Wei debated for months before finally sending her a letter, a simple message expressing condolences and asking if she might be willing to receive him as a visitor. Her reply was brief but warm. She would welcome a visit from an old friend. When they met, both were grayed and marked by time, but the connection between them had not faded. They talked for hours, catching up on decades of separate lives. Lady Chen spoke of her marriage, which had been cordial but loveless, of her children who were now grown, of her relief at finally being able to make her own choices. "I thought of you often," she admitted. "Wondered what my life might have been if I had been free to choose." "And would you have chosen differently?" Zhang Wei asked. Lady Chen was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. The path I took brought me my children, taught me strength, gave me experiences I would not have otherwise had. It was not the life I imagined, but it was not without value." "Nor was mine," Zhang Wei said. "Though I confess, there was always a space in my heart that remained empty, waiting for what might have been." "And now?" Lady Chen asked. "We are too old for romance, too settled in our ways for grand gestures. What do we do with this persistent affection that has outlasted youth?" Zhang Wei smiled. "Perhaps we simply enjoy it. Let it be what it is, two old friends who care deeply for each other, who share a history and can now share whatever time remains." And so they did. Zhang Wei would visit Lady Chen weekly, and they would walk in her garden, talk about philosophy and poetry, play chess and drink tea. There was an ease between them, a comfort that perhaps could only exist between people who had loved and lost and found their way back to each other, not as they were, but as they had become. One day, Zhang Wei said, "I must show you something," and he led her through the western suburbs to a garden with an overgrown gate. "I know this place," Lady Chen said with surprise. "Or I know of it. They say it's haunted." "Not haunted," Zhang Wei said. "Just enchanted. Come." He led her inside, and there was Grandmother Chiu, looking exactly as she had 20 years before, as if time had not touched her. "You have returned," Grandmother Chiu said, smiling. "And you have brought the memory with you." Zhang Wei led Lady Chen to the memory flowers. There, blooming among the others, was the flower he had been shown years before, the vision of them standing together in the garden, aged and at peace. "This was shown to me 20 years ago," Zhang Wei said. "A possible future. I have carried it with me, not knowing if it would come to pass." Lady Chen stared at the flower, then looked at Zhang Wei with tears in her eyes. "We have found our way here after all." They spent many more years as companions, finding in their twilight what they had been denied in their youth. And when Zhang Wei finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, Lady Chen returned to the garden one last time. "Will I find him again?" she asked Grandmother Chiu. "In whatever comes next." "Nothing is truly lost," Grandmother Chiu said, repeating the words she had spoken so long ago. "Everything continues, somewhere. And love, true love, has a way of finding itself across any distance, any obstacle, even death itself." Lady Chen nodded, understanding. She had lost much in her life, but she had also found much, and in the end, the love that mattered most had endured. That was enough. More than enough. And so our stories from the Ming Dynasty come to an end, dear listener. We have walked through gardens and palaces, sailed on rivers and lakes, and witnessed love in all its forms, forbidden and celebrated, tragic and triumphant, lost and found again. These tales remind us that human hearts have not changed so much across the centuries. We still yearn for connection, still struggle with duty and desire, still find magic in the everyday and meaning in the smallest acts of kindness. May these stories carry you gently into peaceful dreams, where you too might walk in enchanted gardens, meet spirits who teach wisdom, and discover that love, in all its forms, endures beyond the constraints of time and circumstance. Sleep well, dream deeply, and remember, nothing is ever truly lost, and every ending contains within it the seed of a new beginning.